Hi, everyone, and good evening. Happy Tuesday to you. I want to welcome you to this new episode of the Better Together podcast, where we find the hope, the help, and the practical next steps that we need so that we can all get better together. And as always, it's good to have you, whether you're watching live or you're tuning in on the replay, rolling your social media feed. This is the Tuesday after the 4th of July weekend. And as usual, there's a lot happening in our country. And so the Better Together Facebook Live podcast is all about diving into where we're at in life and how we can show up and serve each other. And over the last couple of months, we have talked about a lot of topics, but one of the things for me, I noticed that I've had a lot of conversations with my kids over the last few months. My kids are all grown up now, but because none of us have lived through a whole pandemic before, I realized that as someone who was older and who had seen a lot more, that it was really an opportunity for me to step in and to coach my kids. So if you're with us tonight, this is a conversation about how to coach our kids well. If this is your first time, welcome. For those of you who've been a part of the Better Together Facebook Live, jump in the chat, say hello, tell me how you're doing. If you watched before, you know that this is an interactive experience. And so there will be questions that I post as we talk to today's guest. And so I actually want to introduce today's guest to you because we have a lot of amazing things to talk about. And there just is a way that she communicates that really connects with the heart. So meet my friend, Kristie Christie. She is a speaker, writer, and a child advocate who studies the intersection between empathy and emerging culture. Her work has been regularly featured in the Huffington Post, Darling Magazine, The Good Men Project, Yahoo Parenting. She spends a lot of time posting some amazingly beautiful photos on Instagram. You can follow her at Kristie Christie, and I will have that on the ticker. And I mean, seriously, she's heard this a billion times. I know she's over it, but don't we all want our name to be Kristie Christie? Let's be honest. It's fabulous. Kristie works for Compassion International as a speaker relations manager, coaching and developing communicators who can leverage their voices for children who live in poverty. Before speaking and coaching full-time, she spent 15 years leading children and family programs in Southern California, most recently at Malibu Presbyterian Church. She laid claim to her fun name, Kristie Christie, by marrying just the right man, David Christie. Kristie and David live in Calabasas, California. Friends, welcome to the Better Together Facebook Live, my friend, Kristie Christie. Hi,
hey.
Hello, my friend.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
I am so glad you are here all the way from California. How is it happening out there?
We're doing good. We're just shut down. Can't go to the beach. Can't do any of it, but grateful to be hanging out here in my house. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So California is still on stay at home?
Kind of a modified stay at home. We just shut down our beaches and a few other like public spaces. So it's just moved backwards a little bit in the phasing. But I think personally, I do feel, even though I wouldn't normally go to the beach every day, I just feel like I should be able to. So going to the grocery store is my big outing, friends. So I'm living for it, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, Ohio, we are technically open.
Okay.
However, I like the grocery store, I'm still picking up my groceries. Like I'll go in for one or two things. But yeah, we're still kind of some of us are tiptoeing. There are others who are like, boom. So it all depends.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast people are like back at it, and you're like, whoa, aren't we still being careful, folks? You know? Yeah.
You know, yeah. So for you, over the last few months, what have been just some highlights for you?
Yeah.
Because stay at home has been a little on the nutty side, but you've posted some of the most beautiful photos on Instagram.
Oh, thanks. That's really encouraging. Thanks. That's what I've tried to be, is an encouragement in this season, even if I've had hard days too, you know. Yeah, I traveled a lot prior to shutting down. So it's been a really, really intense, like hard right turn to kind of sit down and you be home. So I told friends like you that I don't think my husband and I have actually had this much time together in the history of our relationship because we both traveled for work. So we have these little like pockets and we coordinate our calendars. So being home together has been the greatest gift, honestly, to be able to be home and just be together. So loving that. And then I've really enjoyed, I have a community of neighbors that I love investing in and just getting to know. And we have front yard gatherings, socially distanced. We bring our own snacks and we sit 6 feet apart. And it's just been cool because I had some Adirondack chairs that I'd stacked up and thought I'd get rid of later. And they've proved to be the best accessory you could have for this time when you do need some good friend time. So those are probably a few of my highlights, but lots more. And cooking. I've been cooking a lot more. So I've found a lot of good recipes and rediscovering my love for that. How about you?
You know, for me, I worked all the way through the pandemic. I was writing a book. I had a book launch. And so as a single empty nester, it was just one of those things I'm going, okay, exactly how am I going to work through this? So I had tons of Zoom calls with friends and colleagues, but it was really quiet here. So I talked to Alexa in my spare time.
That's the best. I love it.
She and I got really
tight. You're real tight.
Yeah, we were tight, but I had a lot of things that just this ended up being a great season to be able to concentrate. So thank you. I wanted to share some of the positives because we're so used to hearing about the negatives during the pandemic. So friends, if you are watching, I would love to hear from you. Tell Kristie and I, what have been one or two things during the pandemic that you went, hey, this is awesome. I mean, whether you made sourdough bread, whether you discovered that you like scrapbooking, whether you fixed something out on the back deck, or you just were happy that your behind was at home. And so just tell us what you enjoyed. And one of the words that came out of the pandemic, Kristie, other than pivot, which is the word of 2020, pivot. Everybody was pivoting something. But another word was intentional. And that there had to be this, we needed to focus again on what was most important, which is why I really thought you and I could have a great conversation today. Because we want to talk to parents and also grandparents. This season of life now is where we're really reshuffling and relooking at our values as families, as people. And you are uniquely gifted to talk about empathy with children, teaching them empathy. So tell our audience what this is about and how this topic came to mean so much to you.
Yeah, gosh, it's my favorite topic to talk about. So I so appreciate the invitation to come and talk to your audience and connect with you all about this, because I think it's one of the most important social problems we're facing, which is the decline of empathy. So how this started is I was a children's pastor for about 15 years. My most recent calling was to Malibu, California, where I worked with a lot of affluent families, kids that had more than enough. And hearing their Christmas, like, what did you get for Christmas answers was often like startling to a kid. I grew up pretty middle class. So it was like, whoa, that's a lot of things to get for Christmas. And so the families I was working with, not a single one of them wanted to see their kids grow up entitled. They didn't want to see their kids seem like they had no touch with reality. They were actually really intelligent, creative, amazing friends of mine who wanted to see their kids grow up grateful and to know what the meaning of enough was. So we began this process and journey together to figure out, how do you raise kids who have so much to know what enough is and not just grasp for more. So on that journey, fast forward, I ended up going to the Dominican Republic with compassion and stood on some of the most, just in some of the most desperate poverty right along the Haiti border. So as you know, Haiti is one of the poorest countries of the Western Hemisphere. So stood on this road just after leaving my affluent community where my husband and I got on a date right before I left town. And these kids were like running at us, like, and their collective noise was kind of like, mine, me, get out of my way. And they almost knocked us over. And I found myself in the dirt roads of the Dominican Republic amongst kids who knew what enough was, who barely had it, but they knew what it was. And so there was one little boy in particular who stood in front of me as I had a friend there that was doing magic tricks, and he had done them with Oreo cookies, right? He opens a snack pack of Oreos, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, bad decisions. There's like 65 kids here. We have 6 Oreos. As a children's pastor, I go into that thinking, I'm like, oh, this is going to be mayhem, and how can I help him solve this? What was he thinking? Because in America, that, am I right? Like that would just be chaos, right? Kids would just be like, wait, not fair. And so that question didn't seem to even occur to these kids. As this little boy took his snack pack of Oreos, he took his one Oreo out. He was given one Oreo, sorry. And he takes a bite and he looks at his friend and he hands the Oreo to his friend who takes a bite. That little boy passes the Oreo on to a little girl. She takes a bite. And I stood there, Barb, with tears coming down my face as I watched 5 kids share one Oreo. And this is the question I began to ask. Why is it that the kids who have more than enough run and grab for more like it's their job? Let's be honest. Why do I run and grab for more? And yet the people, yet the children who live in extreme poverty, who barely have enough, who are barely surviving, are so generous with what they have. They know how to live in community. They know how to share and be together. And I thought, I want to start exploring that. What is the problem of entitlement in our culture? What's the root of it? And what I've found, my conclusion, is that it's a lack of empathy. That when we only know what our needs are, and those are the most important, when I'm only concerned with me, then I run and grab for more because I got to get mine. But if I'm connected in empathy to the people around me, if I know what their needs are, if I know that you need something that I have, that if my empathy quotient is higher, then I'll share. And so what I found as I did what you do, a Google search, was that there's been a 40 to 50% decline in empathy in just the last 12 years. Since 2007. Is that 12 now? Yeah, 13, 12, 13. 12, yeah. When I first did this research, it was 10 years. It was 10 years apart. And I was collecting up every bit of data I could from professors at Harvard, Stanford, from a researcher out of the University of Michigan, who's done a lot of incredible work, named Sarah Conrath. Then I connected with this woman in Germany who's been doing research on where the empathy center of the brain is. How do we grow that empathy center? How do we activate that and bring it more alive? And here's the good news. For that decline, and we can talk about the why behind that, there is hope. We can grow empathy. Even me, even you, we can grow. We have an endless capacity to grow empathy. It's a muscle we can stretch and grow. And that means that kids can grow in their empathy. So I began a journey of trying to figure out, how do we grow empathy in the next generation? Because the lack of empathy is connected to suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, addictive behaviors. So it's not just that we want our kids to be good people, but it's actually good for them to be connected to others.
Ooh, that is powerful. That is absolutely powerful, and so very, very true. I know that as for me as a parent, I wanted, my girls are adults, but I cared about them learning how to care about others. Entitlement or empathy wasn't necessarily terms that we began with or talked about, but it was a desire. Now, entitlement and empathy, those are now terms that we have So what does it look like? What are some ways that we can actually teach our children or grow their empathy?
Love it. Well, I want to first make a point that often has been brought to me is that we see so much activism in the emerging generation. Isn't that empathy? And the truth is, while those behaviors can be really positive, it's not necessarily empathy because they don't have empathy for someone else's experience. That might have an opposing viewpoint that may not agree with them. It can be, but there is a lot of activism for the underdog, which is great, which is a great thing to see. What I'm also wanting to help cultivate is a broader sense of our human connection. Even as we don't agree on everything, we can be unified in this collective sense of knowing, hey, I can put myself in your shoes and understand where you're coming from. So defining empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, to understand their experience, to be able to look through their eyeballs and kind of say, I think I know what it would be to walk your road. So I've put together 5 messages that I believe, so out of all the research I collected, which I'm a nerd, okay? Like I love research and I love reading all this stuff, and just my heart was really for all the families that are all around me and to say, how do we put those cookies on the lower shelf? I mean, academic journals are fun to read, but maybe not for everyone. So how do we, but also I found there was a lot of definition of the problem. I wanted to also define solutions. Are there practical steps we can take to help grow empathy? So that's my focus. So the first is to make sure, first message is life is hard.
Yep.
And that sounds maybe harsh when we're talking to a preschooler, but I think we try to insulate children from the pain of life. And that may be a real first step of the problem. Helicopter parenting, as we call it, or any sort of kind of protective, insular, I don't want my kids to feel hard things. It's actually crippling them from knowing how to grow. So like if you were to, say, let's talk about germs, which we're all really common with talking about it, but talking about immunity, right? If I don't have immunity built up in my body, I can't fight off something harder than maybe the common cold. So I need to get a cold in order to fight other harder things. Similarly, emotionally, I need to learn how to have that conversation with someone that got their turn ahead of me at the slide and that wasn't fair. I need to work through that conflict so that when bigger, harder things come in my life, I have that emotional muscle set, built up.
I think it was Brene Brown, and I don't remember the words, but she talked about how our children are wired for struggle. And the gift that we need to give our kids is to not undo that they're wired for struggle, and we've got to help them understand how to navigate it and not teach kids that struggle is bad. That's like you said, life is hard.
She's so full of good words.
Right? I remember my dad taught me from an early age. He just said, and he wasn't being pessimistic, he just said, life is unfair. And I railed against that message, but it stuck with me because he just said, things are going to happen that are not going to be fair, and you're going to have to know how to deal with them. So that's so good and powerful. All right.
Yeah. All right. So my second one kind of connects to that, which is emotion coaching, emotion regulation. The phrase I've come up with is, you will come through this. So if life is hard, I need to know that I'm going to come through this. And I think that's a message for all of us right now. This is hard. Let's own that. This is hard. This morning, I woke up and I was so anxious, and I didn't have really a source for my anxiety. I looked at David and I said, this just is hard. And he said, it is. And I said, I know. And I went for a walk. I took care of myself, all that. I'm in a good place now. But this, you will come through this. Like, these hard things are a journey. They're not a destination. And that process, really, I studied a lot of emotion coaching, emotion regulation, and really there's a lot of great resources around that from some great writers that talk about how to help our kids, and by the way, also us, move through difficult and complicated emotions. And as I did the research, I honestly was learning a lot for myself to say, how do I move through these and not avoid, not swim in forever, not be afraid of complicated and difficult emotions? because the more we have resiliency to deal with those things, here's the thing, we broaden our capacity to move closer to someone else's pain. So if I can't hold my own pain, when you come towards me with yours and want me to empathize, I'm afraid of it because it might sweep over me. It might cause me to drown. But if I have tools, coping tools to deal with my emotions and even to deal with someone else's complicated emotions, that there's a fullness to our capacity to love others that grows our empathy.
And I believe that the ultimate value is connection, so that we can stay connected to each other. I chose, and I can't, it's Romans 12 something, but last year, as I was going through my divorce, one of the things I didn't want to lose was I didn't want to become the person who was always grouchy and who looked at people who were celebrating life. I didn't want to be that person that couldn't celebrate with them. And so my emotion coaching was rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And because I just thought I need to make sure that I coach myself well, stay connected to people.
So good.
The people that I love in my life, I want to be able to show up for them. And so I had to keep practicing it. So on social media, when people had wedding anniversaries, I still wish them happy anniversary. When there's birthdays or when someone dies, that for me was the emotion coaching so that I could stay sensitive to it all. It wasn't easy, but that's why I had to have practice.
Well, and that's what you're talking about, I think, is the and versus the or. It's like we can stand and say, I'm suffering and I'm hurting. That doesn't take anything away from that. And I'm happy for you. Can I hold both those things? So, and I've watched you. You have been such an example for all of us on how to hold both. I just think you're one of the most amazing women. Seriously. Yeah. Anyways, I could go on and on.
Well, let's go on. I mean, emotion coaching, I love that both of us are passionate about it, because like right here, right now, if listeners, this may be the work for you as a listener for you to do, that you begin yourself. Kids learn by what's caught versus what's taught. So listeners, maybe your big takeaway is to be able to say to yourself that you will come through this and you can begin to live that out vocally as well as with your actions to the people who are around you. And that can make a huge difference. So Kristie, I love that. But let's go to number 3.
Okay, number 3 is people matter most. So it's making sure we stay people-centered and we're looking outward and not just inward, that we're doing a little bit of both, right? We need to look inward, but we also need to look outward and know that people matter more than things, more than our hopes and dreams, all that. We have to like really focus on the people around us and love them well. One of the things that I've really helped a lot of families see is that in the 20 years I've worked with families, I don't think there's anything more effective to help grow a child's empathy than to introduce them to a child in poverty. That's initially how I got involved in compassion, actually, was I was looking for some way to point families at a relationship, not just a transaction, a relationship over an event, because I believe that when we take kids to go feed the homeless, all good things to do, often we teach kids how rich they are and we teach them how poor someone else is. So what I want to do is have these equalizing relationships that where I'm telling you right now, the lessons I've learned from my friends in poverty have helped me so much more in this season to realize, how do you follow God? How do you trust God when you don't know the outcomes?
Yes.
And so they're the ones that have taught me that. So people mattering most, build that relationship with people who, I have a friend, April, who has 3 boys who have a lot, and they're just lovely and they're amazing. And they're constantly trying to teach them to be good stewards of what they have. So they found a neighbor next door who is elderly and widowed and went over and took care of them and just made sure they had everything they needed. They even gave to help he was a bit of a pack rat, so they gave to help clean up his house. But through relationship, her boys really learned that this person is important. He's not just a thing, he's a person.
This is, again, in a way, particularly as the pandemic extends, whether you friends who are listening are stay at home, modified stay at home, if you're masked people, if you're not masked people, it doesn't actually matter. We can all find someone in our lives and lean into that relationship. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be the giant and the small things, but I think the pandemic, it showed us stories of people who did extraordinary acts of love for others and were richer for it.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to number 4, do you want to tell us a little bit more about compassion? I've got a question up here. And so audience, does anybody out there sponsor a compassion child? Tell us about your compassion child. And Kristie, tell us about compassion, especially as it relates to the pandemic.
Yeah. So Compassion is a child sponsorship organization. We sponsor children, right? But we don't just sponsor them, it's holistic child development. So you're sponsoring a child to then connect them to a caring community in their local church that will meet their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. We talk about holistic child development, taking care of the whole child. And through that, you can actually begin a letter writing relationship with that child. And that's what's powerful, parents. If you want to have an easy, quick, today way to build empathy, grandparents, my mom's doing this with her grandchildren and teaching them her values and her faith through letter writing to her sponsored child. They color pictures, do all of that. As far as COVID-19 goes, COVID-19 is devastating the poor. And I just think we need to sit with that. It's truly, Latin America right now is the epicenter for the pandemic right now, and for the way that virus is impacting people who don't have access to medical care, who don't have access to enough food. But there's an economic virus that's spread across the globe. With the shutdown, it's really caused people to not have enough. When you're living on less than $1.90 a day, and you're doing that by going out into the world and doing some task or labor or something that is dependent upon you showing up to do that. If you can't leave your house and you don't have a savings account, you don't have a stimulus check coming, you don't have any of that, how do you feed yourself? How do you have sanitation supplies when you don't have running water in your house? How do you keep clean? So Compassion is providing all those things: medical care, sanitation supplies, rent assistance, and emergency food supplies. And we've delivered emergency food kits to over 2 million families. So if you sponsor a child, you're empowering them to have access to all that they need to get through this really difficult time. So I want to encourage you to do that if you haven't already, or if you already have. My husband and I just sponsored another child. We're up to 7 because we just see this as a very tangible way that we can make a real transformation in this world.
Absolutely. My sponsored child, my compassion child, is in Indonesia, and like Latin America, many of the countries where compassion children are at, the poverty is real. And for those of us who have been to those countries and we have seen them in non-pandemic, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think about what it would be like with the pandemic. And so, friends, I put the address up there at compassion.com. I am a proud part of Compassion, and this is an opportunity for all of us to partner together to show people that they matter. And as Kristie said, what a great way for parents to have a tangible, intentional opportunity to show their children how other people matter and to just really invest in that. So thank you for telling us more about Compassion. We've got number 4 and 5 to go for teaching children compassion. What's number 4?
Number 4 is your choices have consequences. And so making sure that our kids feel, you like that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think trophy culture has taught kids that no matter what you do, you get a trophy, you win. And I don't want to go down that road too far. We all know what that's about. But the truth is that if we clean up their messes, if we always solve all the problems for them, it connects to the first point, right? Life is hard. We need to let them feel the consequences of their actions. Well, we want to live graciously, obviously, with our kids. We want them to feel grace, but they need to learn that when I fall down, I get hurt. So I take care of myself so I don't do that again. And that when I say cruel things to someone, when I hurt somebody, there's a consequence. Our therapist that we did our premarital counseling with said, if you're in line at Starbucks and someone steps back on your foot and then turns around and says, sorry, does your foot still hurt?
Well,
it's not good. And that we've used that analogy many times when we've been in conflict where we'll say, okay, I forgive you, but my foot still hurts. There's still a consequence to what you did. So I think that is one of the key things in growing empathy is understanding that the things I do positively and negatively matter. I matter in what I do in the world. And then the fifth one is to teach your kids to ask curious questions, to be curious about the people around them, to really invite them into, it's a skill to develop, right? There's a lot of adults that don't know how to ask curious questions, but to teach, right? When I was dating, that was the thing I was looking for the most in people, was in a man that I wanted to be in a relationship with. I was like, do you know how to ask curious questions, have reciprocity in relationship? And you cannot grow in empathy if you don't know how to ask about people. So have when we're able, have people over to your house, teach your kids how to ask those questions, to be curious about the world around them and the kids and adults around them.
I love that one as well. That was a skill that I had to work hard on. I come from a very verbal background. There are lots and lots and lots of words in my family of origin. I realized that, especially in college and just in life, that there was just a point at which I wanted to become better at that. And it required more listening skills. I had to listen better in conversations. And then I discovered I wasn't a good listener because listening, that is part of empathy. And so being able to teach our kids how to pay attention to others and then ask. My kids were small, they were good at it because they knew how to be observant and ask embarrassing questions. But I love the idea of coaching kids in the car before we get to an appointment. And I used to coach my kids on their behavior, but I think an opportunity for parents is to actually coach their kids now on questions. What are some questions that we can ask when we visit so-and-so? What's the last thing we saw them on Facebook? Let's ask them about that. I think that would make relationships so much richer.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I asked the audience of what they wanted their kids to learn, Jody said, my grandfather encouraged kids with this when he lost his arm in a farming accident and they had questions for him.
Oh, wow.
Jody, man, you showed up and hit a home run.
That's awesome. It reminds me of my grandpa. He had a stroke, and so he was actually couldn't speak very easily. And so my mom taught us that. You talk about coaching. She would teach us how to have one-way conversations, but also that they would be connecting to him, not just talking at him. And the more we can understand what someone else's need is in a conversation, which is different, right? Like you're saying, there's some families we just offer up our stories all the time, no problem. And then there's others that want to be inquired about,
Very much so. That teaching our kids those skills, I think the beautiful part is that first we have to absorb the lessons ourselves. So friends, if you're watching today, my guest has been Kristie Christie. And before we wrap up, Kristie, I want you to tell us about Revibrant Kids. And I'm going to that running on the bottom. I just want to make sure that we cover that because I saw that new on your Instagram. Tell us what it's all about.
Thank you. Yeah, it's for families of kids ages like 4 to 12 to do all together. It's a guide to help families move through an experiential learning environment, teaches a Bible story, and a main point where this summer our theme is who God is, knowing who God is when we face hard times. Man, we'd love to have any of you join us because we want to help be a companion and a guide to walk through this exciting and hard and difficult season, but emerge on the other side investing in the spiritual development of kids.
Fantastic. Well, the website is revibrantkids.com. And if you didn't see the website at first, or maybe you're just joining in, you didn't get a chance to hear it all, we will have this episode on replay so that you can watch it on the page. And then this episode, as well as all the other episodes of the Better Together Facebook Live, they are at barbruce.com on the blog page. Christie, thank you. You taught us about the 5 lessons that we could teach our kids, but honestly, you really taught us the 5 lessons about empathy that we need for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, and everyone who joined us today, thank you for being a part of the Better Together Facebook Live. New episodes are every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I will see you soon. God bless.